Tutto cessa countertenor Thomas Mark Fallon, Earl Byce at the piano. That was from Orfeo of Gluck, farò, senza, Euridice. Welcome to Around New York.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. When did you discover you had this voice? I mean, was it a discovery, or were you a baritone at one time?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but to make it abbreviated, I had a very active career as a young voice soprano. Began my formal studies when I was 10 years old.
Vocal studies?
Vocal studies, yes, and had an active career, toured nationally as a mall in Manatti's, a mall on the Night Visitors. But I owe my present vocal state to my first teacher. He detected at a very early age the timbre as a young voice soprano that he felt was not going to be lost during the vocal change process.
Meaning going through puberty.
Going through puberty and the vocal change.
A boy normally drops an octave, yeah.
That's true. And he also predicted that I was not going to have a traumatic change process. He felt that I was going to be able to sing right through the change, which was very freaky that he could do that, because
almost
in essence,
no one does it.
That's what happened. Sang right through the vocal change process. The high soprano notes, D's and E's above high C, which I lost. The other top notes, which I held on to as the vocal cords thickened, they grew in strength. Then there was this whole new virgin territory below the staff in the contralto, mezzo, chest range.
Right.
So that all through the change process, as I continued to alter keys from high soprano perhaps to mezzo keys and so forth, there was no stop of the career. It was like an automatic progression from voice soprano right into a full natural countertenor voice.
Yeah, it's, do people expect you to speak like this?
They do, yes. Yeah. I enjoy radio interviews or also auditions when I can speak before I sing,
right.
Because there's always that, shock effect.
Right.
Because some people believe that my speaking voice sounds baritonal or whatever.
Sure. Did you ever sing any baritone stuff?
No, my baritonal stuff, it's not a voice that's trained. It's kind of your barroom type of a sound.
You're kidding?
Yes.
Really?
All my technique has been totally with countertenor, always in the treble clef.
So when you sing as a baritone, it just sounds like somebody who
right off the street, the type of a situation. The real artist and refined instrument is the countertenor voice.
No kidding. So you've always that's always been your voice.
Treble clef and I have gone on for many, many years.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Now, you've won a lot of contests.
Yes.
The last one I heard about, you were going to be in the Pavarotti contest.
Yes.
Where is it, in Philly?
That was held in Philadelphia.
And what happened?
Wonderful news to report there. I came back directly from a performance of Die Frau im Schatten, where I played the Spirit of the Temple in France, to the finals in Philadelphia, and that was a 2-year competition, 1,500 singers worldwide, and I was chosen to be one of the 118 finalists, and from that they went down to 60-some, and then down to an ultimate 38 winners across the board. But it was quite exciting. It was the first time that a countertenor had been chosen as a winner in the Pavarotti competition.
Was there a category for countertenor?
No, it was all voices against each other. So we had baritones and mezzos and tenors and countertenors singing away.
Yeah. But isn't it true that many contests you've been in had no category for so you end up singing against mezzos?
That's true. The first competition I did actually was quite interesting. It was in Toulouse, France, and I took second prize. There it was the male voice and female voice, separate prizes, but we had Dmitri Horostovsky taking first prize in the male division, baritone, countertenor taking second prize, and back to a baritone for third prize. But last year in Bilbao, Spain, I went over there. There was all voices against each other. Right after the first round, there was dissension in the ranks of the jury, because in addition to the prize winners for that competition, they were going to cast an opera as part of the prize, and they were looking at the standard rep, the Barber of Seville or whatever.
Sure.
Of course, there was nothing for me, but they said this artist had to be advanced, so by the second round, going into the finals, they had met and they had decided, the jury, that they were going to create a special prize for the performance of Baroque music, which in essence came out financially as well as the first prize in the competition.
Terrific.
Which was wonderful. So it's, and also in the Rosa Poncel competition, as an example, there was no category. Due to my efforts, we have now finally a countertenor category in that competition.
Yeah.
And they brought me into Alice Tully a few years ago to recognize me as the one who created that category due to my efforts.
Now, you're about to do some, the first piece is from opera. It's probably the most famous pastoral. I'm thinking maybe the most famous pastoral. It's Cherubino from Le Nozze di Figaro, the Marriage of Figaro of Mozart. non so più. You'd like to do trouser rolls, which I guess wouldn't be called, as Margaret Gentwaite, our director, reminded us, probably wouldn't then be called trouser rolls, but trouser rolls, for those who don't know, are rolls of a character that is a male character, but it's sung by a female voice, because it's usually a young boy they're portraying. You'd like to really have countertenors do that again.
Right. As I look at, the next 30 years of my career, performing career, there's a whole chunk of operatic literature. We connotate, of course, a lot of these trouser rolls that are very accessible in lots of productions. Cherubino in The Marriage of Figaro, Cybele in Faust, Orlovsky in Die Fledermaus, Orfeo, as you heard in the opening aria. In addition to a wealth of early music in terms of Handel and Monteverdi, particularly in Handel where there's a lot of castrato, heroic parts, which of course we don't have castratos anymore, so this particular countertenor can kind of fit the bill there. But in the more standard repertoire, exists a wealth of repertoire where if you happen to have the range and the dramatic stature, many people have suggested that it would be quite powerful and convincing to tackle these roles. I think they're wonderful roles. I can relate to all of them. Very often they're the sons of the kings or the princes, the princes or the page boys or whatever. So there's a wealth of repertoire there, and I really enjoy presenting them in both recital and in concert.
Well, I think it's going to be a first for me. I don't think I've ever heard a countertenor do Non so più from the Nozze di Figaro. This is the Cherubino aria. Oh, and then you're going to do what after that? A little piece. I don't think I know this.
Okay. We have My Lovely Celia. It's an early English folk song by George Monro with a lovely arrangement. I think your audience will enjoy a little contrast there.
Pretty. Okay, great. Here's the Cherubino aria, Non so più, from The Marriage of Figaro of Mozart, and then George Monro's My Lovely Celia. It's Thomas Fallon, countertenor, Earl Byce at the piano, singing live for you on Around New York.
Accenti,
Thomas Mark Fallon, countertenor, Earl Byce at the piano, My Lovely Celia, George Monro. What a pretty tune that is. And Non so più of Cherubino's aria from The Marriage of Figaro of Mozart. That George Monro piece, well, I mean, the Non so più was wonderful. It was fabulous. The George Monro is a beautiful piece. We tend to think of those as old and the harmonies as old, and they're not. They're very modern sounding,
Yes,
aren't
very
they?
much so.
The harmonic changes underneath are very beautiful.
So.
Well, would you say that your sound... Well, I'm going to get into that in a minute. Let me take a break, because I have a lot of questions to ask you. My guests in this hour of Around New York are Thomas Fallon, countertenor. Fallon, the sound you get, do you think it's something like what we would have heard in the castrati days?
Yes. When we talk about the countertenor voice as an example, there presently exists now in modern performance times and recording studios when we recreate some of this repertoire of the early music, some of the castrato roles and so forth, two schools of countertenor singing. One would be very popular within England, the English countertenor school, where it is a very light, thin, falsetto sound, very little vibrato used in production, which a lot of musicologists and early music people feel is very appropriate to that style of singing. In the other school of countertenor, of which I belong, it's a natural countertenor sound, as is natural for your audience to hear what they hear vocally, as they hear now in terms of the speaking voice. There's no falsetto mechanism involved at all. So when we talk about, what the castrato sound might have been, we know, however, that they were very well revered artists at their time, highly paid, highly touted for performances and so forth, reputations, divos, I guess, in their days
divos,
and so forth.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
At that particular point. But they were able musically to do some fascinating things, and with instruments of their time and orchestras in terms of the projection and power of that particular voice. Meant one of my trump cards has been, in terms of winning some of the competitions when I've competed against other voices, is that there's no sense or thread of falsetto at all in this sound, and it has a lot of carrying power. It has a lot of mezzo color, male mezzo color, but yet male strength in terms of carrying power. And I think some of those timbres, some of those descriptions could have existed also within the castrato voice as well.
We certainly read of that. I mean, everyone talked about the power of the castrato. And we should say for folks, for whoever doesn't know what a castrato is, it was a boy was surgically altered so that he wouldn't go through puberty, and he would, well, I guess he went through some sort of puberty, but his voice didn't change.
That's right.
So he became this big male soprano.
Yes.
And they did command great attention and fees, and were quite the rage. The last one died. I think he was quite old, in his 80s, just as the recording medium was starting. Isn't that true? We do have a recording of an old castrato.
I think he was a member of the Sistine Chapel, I believe,
That's right.
if I remember, and they were able to get, I have not heard the recording, but they were able to get something together there. You may find it also interesting, Steve, I'm here in New York, making my debut with New York City Opera.
Right.
And the opera is part of the world premiere series entitled Esther. And within the context of Esther, I'm playing the role of Haggai. I'm the first one to create this role, who is the keeper of the harem. And as we know, the keepers of the harem in those days were eunuchs.
That's right.
Okay, so it's interesting in bringing this modern voice into that setting of ancient Persia and so forth. But I'm very grateful, Hugo Weisskall, who is the composer, for allowing a countertenor to be brought into a contemporary piece. And I have the opportunity to do the world premiere of that. I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in a little bit after you sing a little bit more. But this is not a falsetto voice for you.
It is not.
It's a full
natural sound
voice.
Yes. And as a result, it opens a wealth of repertoire possibilities, in terms of recitals. Like, for instance, you've heard of we've talked about the trouser rolls, but I remember 2 years ago doing the first time, as far as I know, the Brahms Alto Rhapsody.
You did it?
I did. I was the soloist with a full male chorus.
Yeah.
And what a fascinating sound, having tenors and baritones and basses in the chorus, and then having this natural countertenor floating above the chorus. It was quite an exceptional...
So as you get down into just a little bit of technical talk, allow me that, audience. When you get down toward the break area, which is E, you don't go through a break of falsetto into full voice.
It's
You just go right through it.
one gear. There's a very easy passaggio there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So your chest, when you go into chest voice, I mean, the whole thing's so fascinating.
It is from bottom to top. It's amazing. You know, when we talk a good 2.5, almost 3 octaves bottom to top, and you know, you're mentioning the castrato rolls. I have an offer actually in Italy to look at a Pergolesi opera entitled Adriano in Syria, and they want me to look at the role of Farnaspe, which was the heroic castrato rolls, and there's some beautiful arias in there. So I hope it all comes to be over in Italy, because you know, you hear Riccardo Muti has done some work at La Scala with Pergolesi, and there's a wealth of repertoire that could be resurrected.
You do all kinds of stuff. You do Broadway things. You do everything.
Irish, Broadway, pop tunes.
You're about to do some Irish, because Fallon is an Irish name.
Fallon is Irish, very Irish.
It's close to my heart.
That's right.
Yeah. A name like Sullivan. Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes is an English tune, arranged by Roger Quilter. That's a traditional tune?
Yes.
Yes, and then Danny Boy is another traditional tune.
Right.
I'll let you get up. He's trying to get in position. Thomas Mark Fallon, countertenor, and at the piano is Earl Byce. They're performing for you live on WNYC's Around New York. Oh, you should never do that to an Irishman on a radio show. Oh, my goodness. Thomas Mark Fallon, countertenor, Earl Byce at the piano, playing so beautifully, Earl is. And Danny Boy, and before that, Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes, Roger Quilter's arrangement, a beautiful arrangement. Goodness me, that's very, very beautiful.
Thank you, Steve.
Powerful singing. Well, I had a bunch of questions and I lost them all. Let's see. Well, why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me about the debut you're going to do with New York City Opera?
Sure. On October the 8th, which is a Friday evening at the New York State Theater, we have the first performance of Esther, a world premiere. It's actually part of 3 world premieres that they're doing that week, and it marks my debut with New York City Opera. We also have a matinee on the 10th of October. Yeah. I must say I'm so thrilled to be back in New York. As you know, I'm based in Boston, but I'm coming down a great deal now in New York. I have a new manager here based in New York. And Earl Byce is a wonderful pianist, as you've heard. He and I are collaborating on a number of auditions and some future recitals.
So. You sound wonderful together. Earl's a fine pianist. Yeah.
Great musician and wonderful accompanist. So I'm happy to be with him. We're looking at some interesting activities coming up. I have Handel's Saul with West Virginia Symphony. Last year with Skitch Henderson with the Florida Orchestra, we did a whole Irish Pops evening with full orchestra going after a lot of the standard Irish tenor songs. Met to great success in Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Clearwater. And we're negotiating and hoping we might be able to bring that to Carnegie Hall with the New York Pops in the 95 season. We're hoping to work that out if possible. And a number of other orchestras interested in doing that. What we have, Steve, basically is a countertenor who can sing almost anything. We're talking, I have a liturgical music background, so I do a lot of freelance soloist at weddings and so forth, and religious repertoire. We have this wealth of operatic repertoire, both in terms of early music and the trouser roles that are opening up at that point. The standard oratorial, Handel's Messiah, Israel in Egypt, a lot of the Bach cantatas and passions.
Do you do Handel's Julius Caesar? Because that was written for a castrato, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Actually, I've done Ptolomeo in that, and I'm working on the role of Caesar.
Caesar itself,
Caesar itself. It's wonderful music.
It's a fabulous role.
It is. Yeah. It is wonderful.
I've never heard it sung by a countertenor. Certainly, I've never heard it sung by a castrato. The sound in my head is that of Norman Traegle, who took it over, which was quite an astonishing feat because he's a bass person.
That was the big performance with Miss Sills as well.
Absolutely, in the mid-'60s, yeah. You actually took a degree in divinity? No, in liturgical music?
Sure. My undergraduate years at the New England Conservatory, I did a bachelor's degree in vocal performance and did some choral conducting minor in that direction. While I was doing that, I was a church musician in Cambridge for 4 years.
My hometown.
Right, and then I decided to go off to the Midwest to Notre Dame and do 2 masters, one in both music and in liturgical studies, and then found myself doing a director of music and liturgy in a number of Roman Catholic parishes in the country, but then decided a few years back that it was after getting some accolades in some of the competitions that there was a big world out there that needed to hear this rare voice.
Did you go to IU?
No, I went to Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Yes. Did you go to... Somebody said Eastman?
I spent a year at Eastman.
That's it. And didn't Jan DeGaetani say go to Boston?
That's the story there, yes. Yeah. I went to Jan for a year there, and she said, Thomas, where you're at and where I think you can go. She was a great loss, Jan. She's a real sweetheart. But she said, I would like you to consider going to Boston, and I have specific teachers in mind for you. Yeah. And matter of fact, my teacher there was Ray Duvall, who had done work in New York with the New York Pro Musica at the time of Russell Oberlin and so forth.
Sure.
And Ray just passed away a few weeks ago.
Heard you.
Yes, he did, and encouraged my work at an early start when I was doing that. And both Earl and I have great respect for Russell's work when his early recordings of Purcell and Handel and so forth.
Purcell's wonderful to sing with a voice like yours. Did you do a little work with Robert White?
Yes, I did some work here with Robert White as well.
He's another sweetheart.
Yes, and then most recently with Phyllis Curtin up in Boston.
Yeah. Well, it's been a delight having you here. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Remind folks again where you're going to be on October the 8th.
October the 8th, 8 p.m., Hugo Weisgall's Esther, and October the 10th, 1:30 matinee, Esther as well. World premiere, debut for countertenor Thomas Mark Fallon.
Yeah. Good for you. And that's at New York City Opera. And my thanks, too, to Earl Byce. Please do come back.
Wonderful.
Thomas Mark Fallon, countertenor, on Around New York.